Hello everyone, welcome to our lesson today. We are looking at modal verbs in a lot more depth. So we've looked at this in the course, the IELTS Grammar Masterclass course before slightly when we looked at verbs, but today we're going to go into much more detail into modal verbs. We'll look at each one, how you can use them. And then, of course, we'll have examples where you can apply this if you are practicing and taking the IELTS test. So hopefully this is helpful today. Let's get started. Okay, before we start though, let's think about what exactly are modal verbs. Well, they are a type of auxiliary verbs, and we've seen auxiliaries before, so we have this big umbrella of verbs. Underneath it we have auxiliary verbs, and underneath auxiliaries we have modal verbs. And there's a clue in the name. They express modality. What is modality? Well, it's a clue into the speaker's attitude. So this could be anything from necessity, possibility, probability, permission as well, whether something is allowed, ability, whether you can do something, obligation, whether you should do something. I'm giving you some clues here as to some modal verbs, or requests, polite questions perhaps. And they're related to the main verb, so this is an important point. They are not the main verb, but they assist the main verb. So the main verb is like the main course, whereas modal verbs are like the side garnish. They help the main verb, they work together, they're friends. Okay, let's get started then. Let's see about which words are actually modal verbs. So can, you might see this a lot in sentences. This is used primarily with ability, whether you can do something, possibility, whether something can happen, permission, whether you're allowed to do something, or a request. So you'll notice that modal verbs are quite flexible actually, and they can be used to express different modes. So they're not restricted to just one mode. They can be used in a variety of different ways, and I've got a few examples for you. So you could be asked in the IELTS test or just in general, can you speak more than one language? So that's talking about ability here. And then you could say, yes, I can speak both English and Spanish fluently. Another modal verb here, similar to can, so it can almost be used interchangeably, is could, but it's used in a more polite way, or potentially a hypothetical context is something that's not necessarily real, but hypothetical. It could be a real event. For example, could you describe a challenging situation you have faced at work or in your studies? So you might be asked in the IELTS exam a question with could because it's more of a polite, formal setting. Certainly. In my previous job, I encountered tight deadlines, and one particular project could be quite demanding. Will, again, very common in sentences. This is used with the future, so we've seen this before in tenses. So future actions, or to make promises as well. So a question here, will you continue to live in your current city in the future? So focusing on the future here. I'm not entirely sure, but I think I will consider moving to a different city for new opportunities. So you're seeing these modal verbs being used in both the question and the answer here. Would, used for polite requests, offers, or again expressing hypothetical, potentially real situations. If you could visit any place in the world, where would you go? I would love to visit Japan. The rich culture and beautiful landscapes have always fascinated me. Shall now, so this is used for suggestions. I'd say it's a little bit more formal than other modal verbs. It can be used for offers and asking for advice as well. Shall we talk about the importance of environmental conservation? Yes, we shall discuss the significance of protecting the environment for future generations. Okay, there we go. What's next? We can have should as well. That's another modal verb. This is expressing advice, recommendations, or obligation as well. So something you should do. What qualities should a good leader possess? A good leader should be visionary, decisive, and should have the ability to inspire and motivate their team. So you can see that 2 shoulds are in the answer, and that's okay as well. You're welcome to use it and repeat it. If you don't want to repeat yourself too much, you could also swap in a modal verb. So yes, that's okay to have 2 shoulds in the answer, and you can always swap them in. If you wanted to add a bit more variation, you could use another modal verb. For example, a good leader should be visionary, decisive, and must have the ability to inspire. May. This indicates permission, possibility, or uncertainty. May I ask about your opinion on technology's impact on communication? Of course, I believe technology may facilitate communication, but it may also lead to a decrease in face-to-face interactions. Okay, that was may. What's next? Might. Very similar to may. Permission, possibility, and uncertainty. So when we're not sure about something, we can use might. Do you think people might use public transportation more in the future? So this is connected to a future situation. It's hard to predict, but with growing environmental concerns, people might increasingly opt for public transportation. Must. We've mentioned this before. This expresses necessity, obligation, or a strong recommendation. So should is pretty strong, but must, I would say, is a bit more strong there. In your opinion, what qualities must a good student possess? A good student must be dedicated, organised, and must have a strong desire to learn and improve. So again, just like should, we've seen this repeat of the modal verb here. Again, you can also interchange that second must with another modal verb like should, for example. Ought to. This indicates moral obligation, duty, or advisability. Something that should happen. What do you think you ought to do to improve your score? Well, I ought to study in a more effective manner and focus on my weak areas. So ought to, I'd say, is a bit more formal. It's similar to shall. It's not as frequent as, say, the other modal verbs, but nevertheless, it's good to be aware of. And in some contexts, it's really vital to use this modal verb, like in this one. Okay, so those were our modal verbs. Now we're aware of them, let's go on to what we can express, and then I'll show you some modal verbs which you can use to express the different modes, the different attitudes. So if we are wanting to express possibility, what could we use? We can use might. For example, It might rain later, so bring an umbrella. We're not sure whether it's going to rain, but there's a possibility. Could as well. There could be a solution to the problem if we analyse it carefully. So these are two that you can use for possibility. Probability now, the likelihood of something happening. There must be a mistake in the calculations because the results seem unusual. So must here, there has to be, it's very likely. If you're less sure, you can use might again. So she might attend the meeting if her schedule allows. Certainty, if you're very, very sure about something, you can use will. I am certain that this approach will yield positive results. There can't be any doubts that climate change is a pressing issue. So we've actually used not here, and we've used a contracted form. Cannot becomes can't. So you're welcome to use modal verbs with not to express these modes as well. Okay, permission, whether something is allowed. Students may use dictionaries during the exam. So may, you're allowed to do something. Or can, you can go ahead and start your presentation. So that's permission there. Ability, something you can do. So can is an obvious one here. She can speak 5 languages fluently. I could solve the problem after reviewing the instructions. Okay, obligation, something that you should do. So must is a good one. Citizens must abide by the laws of the country. Another one, employees must attend the mandatory training session. So must is a really good choice for this one. Necessity, something that, whether something should happen. So to succeed, one ought to put in a considerable amount of effort. This is quite a formal sentence using one instead of the more informal you, for example. In such cases, immediate action must be taken. So must again there. Okay, prohibition, something that's not allowed. You must not use your phone during the exam. You could also say mustn't here as well. We've got it here. You mustn't smoke in this area. So must not, mustn't. You can use not with these modal verbs as we've mentioned before. And advice. What if you want to give some advice? You can use should. In order to stay healthy, you should exercise regularly. If I were you, I would consider all the options before deciding. Speculation, when you're not sure about something, but you are thinking about the likelihood of something happening or taking place. He might be at the meeting already, so might. The sudden increase in prices could be due to inflation. So these situations are not for certain, but we are just taking an informed guess, if you like. Okay, so there we have it. We've looked at all the modal verbs, and then we've looked at them in a different context as to how you can use these to express the different modes. And you can see that some of them come up a lot, and you can express lots of different modes with them. Some of them are a bit more specific, so it's good to be aware of what you can do with modal verbs. So let's end today with some practice and see how we get on with them. Okay, so we have a blank. I say that I really enjoy spending my free time reading books and exploring different genres. So we've got some options here. What could the blank be? Is it should? Is it might? Or is it can? Have a think. What would be the best fit here? Let's double check. I think can would work really nicely here. I can say something that in a way this expresses ability because you can say something, but also it expresses something that you like. So I can say that and then something you enjoy or you not enjoy, just something that is true to you. Okay, brilliant. Another one, we've got 2 blanks this time. Last summer, the opportunity to visit a beautiful coastal town where I experienced the local culture and enjoy the breathtaking scenery. Do we have firstly will, then shall? Do you think it's had, then could? Or maybe had, then might? Have a think. Think about tense in this one. So we're starting off with last summer. That's a bit of a clue. See what would work. We've got different tenses going on here. So this one's a little bit tricky, but just have a go. See what we can do. Okay, let's double check. Okay, another one. The line graph illustrates the trends in global temperatures over the past century, and it suggests a concerning pattern of increasing temperatures. So what could this be? May, might, or could? All right, so we're thinking about trends here. This is relevant to maybe the task 1 in the IELTS exam. Something that we are not 100% sure about, but we want to suggest that it's maybe likely. So have a think which one would work well here. I think may is quite nice here. It may suggest a concerning pattern of increasing temperatures. Okay, well done if you got that correct. Another one. I am writing to inform you that I am unable to attend the upcoming meeting due to a family emergency. We possibly reschedule for it next week. Okay, so we've got possibilities of could, can, shall. Right, and notice the capital letter here because we are starting a sentence. So we've got a question. This is quite a perhaps formal situation we can get from the context. That's a bit of a clue there. I would use could for this one because it's slightly more formal. But you can use can, but could is a bit more fitting in this context. Okay, and another one. We've got 2 here. While some argue that stricter penalties deter criminals, others believe that a focus on rehabilitation be more effective in reducing reoffending rates. Oh, it's hard to think about 2 in one passage, but we'll give it a go. Let's see. Is it might and will? Is it can, then might? Or is it will, then might? So with this one, we know that might is in there somewhere. We've just got to decide whether it's the first blank or the second blank. And if it's the second, we've got the choice of can and will. So we've got the clue that it's might, but we've got to figure out the other one. Okay, see what you think. I'll show you what could be a nice fit here. You could have, while some argue that stricter penalties will deter criminals, others believe that a focus on rehabilitation might be more effective. So that's nice with the counter side there, with the other side, might. So will and might. Okay, brilliant. Well, well done if you got some of those correct. Those were quite tricky, so really good practice there. And thank you so much for coming along today. I hope that has cleared up any modal verb questions for you. And it's really... cut this bit. And I'm sure that you'll see them a lot in your sentences after going through them today. They do come up very regularly. So best of luck with your IELTS practice, and we'll see you in the next lesson.